For over 1,500 years, something has lurked in the dark waters of Loch Ness. Ancient Scottish legends spoke of deadly water spirits that dragged travelers to their deaths. Medieval monks recorded encounters with massive creatures in the River Ness. And in 1933, the modern world became obsessed with Nessie, a supposed prehistoric monster hiding in Scotland's most famous lake. Thousands of eyewitness accounts, hundreds of photographs, dozens of sonar expeditions, millions of tourists searching the murky depths. For nearly a century, Loch Ness has been one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. Scientists have tried everything to find the truth. Submarines explored the depths. Sonar sweeps mapped every contour of the loch bottom. Underwater cameras captured hours of footage. But every expedition ended the same way: tantalizing hints, ambiguous evidence, and no definitive proof. Until 2018. That was when scientists deployed a technology so powerful, so sensitive, that it could finally answer the question that had haunted researchers for generations. Is there really something unknown living in Loch Ness? The method had never been used on this scale before. The results took over a year to analyze. And when Professor Neil Gemmell from New Zealand's University of Otago finally announced the findings in 2019, what he revealed shocked even the skeptics who thought they knew what the investigation would find. This is the story of how scientists finally cracked the Loch Ness mystery, the investigation that changed everything, and the shocking discovery that rewrote a legend that had survived for over 1,000 years. To understand why Loch Ness became the world's most famous monster legend, you need to understand that Nessie was not invented in 1933. The modern phenomenon built on centuries of Scottish folklore about deadly creatures living in Highland waters. Ancient Celtic myths described water spirits called kelpies, supernatural beings that could shapeshift. They often took the form of beautiful horses to lure travelers close to the water's edge, then drag them to their deaths. These were not just cautionary tales. They were deeply embedded in Highland culture as explanations for why people sometimes drowned in lochs and rivers. Another legendary creature was the Knuckle of V, described in Scottish mythology as a skinless sea demon, part horse and part man, emerging from water to spread disease and destruction. These myths served a practical purpose. They kept children away from dangerous waters, and they explained the mysterious deaths that occurred near deep lochs. Loch Ness, specifically, had its own regional legends long before the modern era. The loch is extraordinary, 23 miles long and more than 750 feet deep in places. It contains more fresh water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. Its water is dark, stained by peat from the surrounding highlands, making visibility underwater almost zero. It is cold, deep, and ominous looking even on sunny days. The first historical account that resembles modern Nessie sightings comes from the 6th century, the story of Saint Columba, an Irish monk who brought Christianity to Scotland. According to the life of Saint Columba, written by a Dumnon around 565 CE, Columba was traveling near the River Ness when he encountered a group of people burying a man who had been attacked and killed by a water beast. Columba ordered one of his followers to swim across the river. The creature rose from the depths to attack, but Columba made the sign of the cross and commanded the beast to retreat. It obeyed. This story established Loch Ness as the home of something dangerous over 1,400 years ago. But for centuries, it remained a local legend. That changed in 1933. The catalyst was not the creature itself. It was a road. In 1933, the A82 road was completed along the northwestern shore of Loch Ness. For the first time, the loch was easily accessible by automobile. More people near the loch meant more potential witnesses. In April 1933, a couple named Aldi and John Mackay reported seeing an enormous creature rolling and plunging in the water. Their account was published in the Inverness Courier on May 2, 1933, under the headline, "Strange Spectacle on Loch Ness." The Mackays were credible witnesses, local hotel owners, not attention seekers. Their testimony carried weight. Then, in July 1933, George Spicer and his wife reported seeing something even more dramatic: a large creature with a long neck crossing the road in front of their car before disappearing into the loch. This matched descriptions of prehistoric animals like plesiosaurs. Word spread. National newspapers picked up the story. By late 1933, the Loch Ness Monster was international news. Hunters arrived hoping to capture it. Scientists arrived hoping to study it. Tourists arrived hoping to see it. In April 1934, the most famous photograph in cryptozoology history was published. An image showed what appeared to be a long-necked creature's head and neck rising from the water. The photograph was attributed to a London gynecologist named Robert Kenneth Wilson, and it became known as the surgeon's photograph. The image was perfect, too perfect. It showed a creature that matched exactly what people expected to see: a prehistoric survivor, a living dinosaur hiding in the depths of Loch Ness. For 60 years, the surgeon's photograph was treated as the strongest evidence for Nessie's existence. It appeared in books, documentaries, and museums. In 1994, the first crack appeared in the legend. Christian Sperling, lying in a hospital bed at age 90, decided to reveal a secret he had kept for 60 years. The surgeon's photograph was a hoax. Sperling had helped create it. The creature was a toy submarine purchased from Woolworths, fitted with a sculpted head and neck made from wood and plastic. The whole contraption was about 12 inches tall, photographed in shallow water to create the illusion of a large, distant object. The hoax was orchestrated by Marmaduke Wetherell, a big game hunter who had been humiliated by the Daily Mail and who sought revenge by arranging a fake monster. The respectable Dr. Wilson submitted the photograph to newspapers to avoid suspicion. When the hoax was revealed, it should have ended the legend. But by 1994, the Loch Ness Monster had become bigger than any single piece of evidence. There were still other photographs, eyewitness accounts, and, most importantly, sonar readings that showed large objects moving in the depths. After the surgeon's photograph was exposed, serious Nessie research shifted toward technology, focusing on sonar and underwater exploration. In the 1960s, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau deployed sonar equipment and recorded numerous contacts showing what appeared to be large moving objects at various depths. Something was down there, something solid enough to reflect sonar. But what? In 1975, Dr. Robert Rines and the Academy of Applied Science produced an underwater photograph showing what appeared to be a diamond-shaped flipper, consistent with a plesiosaur's anatomy. The image was analyzed by experts and published in respected journals. Some argued it showed a genuine unknown animal. Others claimed it was photographic artifacts or debris. But the most ambitious search came in 1987. Operation Deep Scan deployed 20 boats equipped with sonar in a coordinated sweep of the entire loch. If something large was in Loch Ness, this operation would find it. The sonar detected 3 contacts that appeared to be large, moving objects at significant depth, much larger than any known fish, moving in ways that did not match sonar artifacts. Boats converged immediately, but when they arrived, nothing was found. No visual confirmation, no photographs, no physical evidence. The contacts appeared, registered on multiple systems, showed movement, and then vanished. Were these equipment errors, schools of fish, or genuine creatures that evaded the boats? Nobody knew. And that uncertainty kept the mystery alive for another 30 years. Loch Ness itself makes investigation almost impossible. The water is so dark that visibility is measured in inches. The loch is deep enough that submarines are needed. Cold temperatures and steep walls create acoustic effects that make sonar difficult to interpret. It was the perfect hiding place. Definitive proof seemed impossible until technology advanced to the point where hiding became impractical and eventually impossible. By 2018, a revolutionary technique was changing biology: environmental DNA sampling. The principle is simple but powerful. Every living organism constantly sheds DNA into its environment through skin cells, scales, mucus, and excrement. That DNA dissolves in water and persists for days or weeks before degrading. By collecting water samples and extracting all DNA present, scientists can determine exactly what species have been in that water. The technique is so sensitive that a single rare fish swimming through a lake leaves detectable DNA. A population of large animals living permanently would leave abundant genetic signatures. Environmental DNA had been used successfully worldwide to detect rare species and survey biodiversity. But it had never been applied to Loch Ness until Professor Neil Gemmell proposed the most comprehensive biological survey ever conducted there. The plan was straightforward. Collect water samples from across the entire loch at multiple depths, extract every DNA fragment, sequence it all, and compare results against databases containing genetic information for every known species on Earth. If an unknown large animal lived in Loch Ness, its DNA would be there. Guaranteed. And it would show up as genetic material that did not match anything in the databases. This was the definitive test that would finally answer the question after nearly a century of searching. In June 2018, Gemmell's team collected over 250 water samples from locations across Loch Ness. They sampled surface waters and deep waters. They sampled near shores and in the center. They sampled where sightings had been frequent and where none had occurred. The samples were sent to laboratories in New Zealand, Australia, Denmark, and France for independent processing. Multiple facilities would analyze the same samples using identical protocols, ensuring the findings could be trusted. The DNA extraction and sequencing took months. Every fragment of genetic material, from bacteria to fish to anything else in the water, was identified and cataloged. The databases contained sequences from hundreds of thousands of species. Matches would be identified. Anything unknown would be flagged. The world waited. Believers hoped for vindication. Skeptics expected confirmation that the loch contained only ordinary creatures. Neither group was fully prepared for what the results actually showed. In September 2019, Professor Gemmell held a press conference to announce findings from the most comprehensive biological survey ever conducted on Loch Ness. The room was packed with journalists, researchers, and Nessie enthusiasts. Cameras from news organizations worldwide were present. This was the moment that might finally resolve a mystery that had captivated humanity for generations. Gemmell explained the methodology: over 250 samples, multiple independent laboratories, and comparisons against comprehensive databases. This was as definitive as modern science could be. Then he revealed the first major finding. Gemmell said, "We found no evidence whatsoever of a creature resembling a plesiosaur or any other prehistoric reptile in Loch Ness." The room erupted with questions. Gemmell continued, "The DNA from Loch Ness contains exactly what you would expect from a Scottish freshwater loch. We found fish species native to the region: pike, salmon, trout, char. We found bacteria. We found genetic material from terrestrial animals that drink from the loch: deer, sheep, dogs. Everything we found was a known species. No unknown DNA meant no unknown creature. The mystery was solved. There is no Loch Ness Monster." But Gemmell was not finished. While they had not found a plesiosaur, they had found something unexpected that might finally explain what people had been seeing for decades. Gemmell said, "We did find one very significant result, and the room went silent. The quantity of eel DNA in Loch Ness is extraordinary, far more than we expected, far more than in comparable Scottish lochs. Eel DNA appeared in virtually every sample we collected, at every depth throughout the entire loch. European eels, Anguilla anguilla, are common in Scottish freshwater. They are typically 2 to 3 feet long, snake-like fish living on the loch bottom. Nothing unusual about them except the sheer quantity of eel DNA suggested the population was enormous. Crucially, while DNA reveals what species is present, it cannot tell you the size of individual animals. We cannot tell from DNA whether the eels are small or large, Gemmell explained, but we know eels can grow much larger than their typical size under the right conditions. Specimens over 6 feet long, weighing over 20 pounds, have been documented. Given Loch Ness's unique environment, deep, cold, dark, with abundant food, it is entirely possible that eels here grow larger than typically recorded. The implication was stunning. The Loch Ness Monster might be real, just not as a plesiosaur. It might be giant eels. The eel hypothesis made immediate sense to anyone familiar with Nessie sightings. Consider what a large eel would look like from the surface. The water is dark, visibility poor, surface often choppy. If a large eel, perhaps 6, 7, or 8 feet long, surfaces, what would you see? A small head on a long, snake-like body undulating through water. If only part of the eel broke the surface, you might see a hump as its midsection arched, while head and tail remained submerged. If swimming rapidly, you might see multiple humps as different body parts briefly surfaced in sequence, exactly what many Nessie witnesses described. Moreover, eels can swim vertically, raising their heads above water while bodies remain below. To a distant observer expecting a monster, this could easily be interpreted as a long-necked creature matching classic plesiosaur descriptions. The eel explanation also accounted for sonar contacts that had puzzled researchers for decades. Large eels would show up on sonar as substantial moving objects, but they are still just eels. When boats arrived to investigate, the eels would move away or descend to the bottom, leaving investigators with unexplained contacts they could not verify. Gemmell stated, "The eel hypothesis fits all the evidence. It explains the sightings, the sonar contacts, and the descriptions of movement and appearance. It accounts for why we've never found physical remains. Eels are native to the loch, so dead eels would not be anomalous. That explains why environmental DNA showed abundant eel presence, but nothing unknown. But the eel hypothesis was not just biology. It was also psychology about how human perception works, especially in conditions that create ambiguity. Loch Ness conditions are perfect for misidentification. Dark water means poor visibility. Peat staining creates unusual optical effects. Waves, reflections, and light patterns can create shapes that are not there. Floating logs, swimming birds, boat wakes, and large eels combine to produce ambiguous visual stimuli. Now add human psychology. People do not come to Loch Ness with neutral expectations. They come hoping to see something. Their brains are primed, prepared to interpret ambiguous shapes as the creature they are seeking. When you expect to see a monster and encounter something ambiguous and poor visibility, your brain fills in the gaps. It constructs a coherent interpretation from incomplete data. If you are primed to see a long-necked creature, a large eel undulating at the surface becomes exactly that. This is not lying or delusion. It is normal perception. Studies in cognitive psychology repeatedly demonstrate that expectation shapes what we see. In ambiguous conditions, we see what we are prepared to see rather than what is objectively present. The Loch Ness environment maximizes ambiguity. Human psychology, combined with large eels genuinely present in abundance, creates perfect conditions for a monster legend to persist despite no monster existing. Gemmell's findings were published in peer-reviewed journals. Other researchers analyzed the methodology and the data. The consensus was clear. The environmental DNA study was rigorous, comprehensive, and definitive. There is no unknown species in Loch Ness, no plesiosaur, no prehistoric survivor. Everything in the loch is a known species. The most likely explanation for decades of sightings is large eels misidentified by hopeful observers in poor visibility. The scientific mystery was solved, but not everyone accepted it. Despite comprehensive environmental DNA evidence, many Nessie believers refuse to accept that the mystery is solved. Online forums and cryptozoology communities argue that something unknown still lives in Loch Ness. Some say the sampling might have missed the creature, that if there is only one Nessie or a very small population, DNA could have been absent from specific sampled locations. Scientists point out that 250 samples across the entire loch at multiple depths is extraordinarily comprehensive. Water circulation would distribute genetic material throughout the system. A large creature shedding cells continuously could not hide from this sampling level. Others suggest Nessie might be a species that does not shed much DNA or whose DNA degrades unusually rapidly in Loch Ness water chemistry. This contradicts everything known about biochemistry. All organisms shed DNA constantly. Environmental DNA sampling detects even degraded genetic material. If Nessie existed and lived in the loch, its DNA would be there. Some propose Nessie only occasionally enters the loch from underground sea connections, explaining absent permanent DNA evidence. Geological surveys have definitively ruled out such connections. Loch Ness is landlocked. Its bottom has been extensively mapped. There are no caves or tunnels to the ocean. The resistance reveals something important. For many people, mystery is more valuable than truth. Nessie represents wonder and possibility, that despite our technology, the world still holds secrets. Accepting that it is eels and misidentification feels like losing something precious. But there is more than emotional resistance. Evidence patterns reveal why the monster cannot be real. Sightings peaked in the 1930s and have declined steadily. If a breeding population of large unknown animals lived in the loch, sightings should be consistent. Instead, they correlate with media attention, spiking after publicity and dropping during quiet periods. This is the signature of a social phenomenon, not a biological one. Additionally, in the smartphone age, clear photographs should be common. Every tourist carries a high-quality camera. Boats constantly traverse the loch. Webcams monitor the water 24/7. Yet clear, verifiable images have decreased as camera technology improved. If Nessie were real, better cameras should produce better evidence. Instead, the opposite happened. This pattern is consistent with misidentification and hoaxes becoming easier to detect, not with a real creature becoming more elusive. The most telling evidence is what has not been found. No bodies, no bones, no physical remains. A population sustainable over decades would experience deaths. Bodies would sink or wash ashore. In a loch as thoroughly searched as Loch Ness, remains would have been discovered. They have not because there is nothing to find. The scientific consensus is definitive. The Loch Ness Monster, as traditionally imagined, a prehistoric survivor, a plesiosaur, or similar unknown creature, does not exist. Environmental DNA evidence, lack of physical remains, sighting patterns, and the eel hypothesis all point to the same conclusion. The mystery is solved. After nearly a century of investigation, science has cracked the Loch Ness mystery. And what they found is shocking, not because they discovered a dinosaur, but because they proved the monster millions believed in was never there at all. But that does not mean Loch Ness is unimportant. What happened there teaches us crucial lessons about human nature, perception, and our relationship with mystery. The Loch Ness Monster is real not as a creature, but as a cultural phenomenon. It generates millions of pounds annually for Scottish tourism. It is part of Scotland's identity, representing the Highlands, mystery and ancient legends persisting in the modern world. Nessie reveals how our brains work, how expectation shapes perception, how ambiguous sensory data gets interpreted through belief's lens, and how honest people can be completely wrong about what they have seen. Loch Ness conditions, dark water, poor visibility, large eels, floating debris, and wave patterns create perfect circumstances for misidentification. Add human psychology, priming, expectation, and excitement, and you get decades of sincere witnesses reporting something that was never there. This is not witness failure. It is normal human perception operating in abnormal conditions. Loch Ness also demonstrates how persistent myths can be. Even after definitive scientific evidence, belief continues. Not because believers are irrational, but because belief serves emotional needs, wonder, connection to mystery, and hope that the world still holds secrets. Most importantly, Loch Ness shows that science can solve ancient mysteries, but it takes time and the right technology. For decades, researchers lacked tools sensitive enough to definitively determine what lived in the loch. Sonar was ambiguous, photography unreliable, and eyewitness accounts subjective. Then environmental DNA changed everything. Finally, there was technology that could not be fooled, could not misidentify, and could not be hoaxed. When applied comprehensively, the truth emerged. The age of cryptozoology is ending, not because all mysteries are solved, but because we now have tools to definitively determine whether large, unknown creatures exist in specific, searchable locations. And repeatedly, the answer is, they do not. Professor Gemmell remains philosophical about the legend's death. People will keep seeing things in Loch Ness. The conditions that create misidentifications have not changed. Large eels are still there. Logs still float. Waves still create patterns. And people still come hoping to see something extraordinary. What's changed is we now know what is actually in the loch. We have a complete genetic inventory. There is no monster. But that knowledge will not stop people from hoping, from looking, from interpreting what they see through the legend's lens. And maybe that is okay. Maybe Nessie serves a purpose as myth even though it does not exist as biology. It brings people to the Highlands. It makes them look at nature with wonder. It reminds us that mystery can exist even when specific mysteries get solved. The Loch Ness Monster is dead. Science killed it. But the legend will survive because humans need legends more than we need facts. The Loch Ness mystery is finally cracked. What scientists found is shocking. There never was a monster. Just eels, misidentification, hope, and the very human need to believe in something magical hiding in dark water. The DNA evidence is conclusive. The explanations are compelling. The science is settled. Loch Ness holds no prehistoric survivors, no unknown species, no monsters, just legends, eels, and thousands of people who still look at the water and hope to see something extraordinary, even though science has proven definitively that what they are hoping for was never really there. The mystery is solved. The shocking truth is revealed. And Loch Ness, despite losing its monster, remains as captivating as ever. A reminder that sometimes the stories we tell are more powerful than the truths we discover.